stalemate.
Well, for more on the asylum stalemate, political editor Lyndal Curtis spoke to the opposition's spokesman on border protection, Michael Keenan.
Michael Keenan, welcome to ABC News 24.
Pleasure to be here.
Are you waiting for a call from the Prime Minister? She did put one out very publicly yesterday.
Well, that's the point. I mean, she hasn't picked up the phone and spoken to Tony Abbott. She hasn't picked up the phone and spoken to Scott Morrison, and certainly nobody's spoken to me. All she's done is brief the media that they might be looking at doing something else, but they haven't explained how their position has changed, what they might be looking at. And clearly I don't think this is the way you would go about anything in good faith.
With all those questions in your head, is that not enough for one of you, for Mr Abbott or Mr Morrison or yourself, to pick up the phone to the Prime Minister's office and say, heard your message yesterday? Do you want to have a meeting?
Well, we'd be very happy to do that if the government was going to embrace a policy that would actually work. There's been a lot of talk about compromise and a lot of commentary about compromise, but I don't believe that what the Australian people are clamouring for is just a discussion where we come out with yet another failed policy. I think what they're clamouring for is a solution. And we know what that solution is because we have implemented a solution and solved this problem in the past. And obviously would be very happy to support the government if they were to adopt that solution and stop people smuggling.
Are you prepared to look at anything that deviates one iota from the policies John Howard had in place?
Well, what we need is a solution, and we know what that solution is, and that's been our policy for over a decade.
So you're not prepared to look at anything that deviates even a little bit from that?
Well, what we want is a solution. We will look at a solution, and we know what that is, and these are the policies that we've held dear for 10 years. We've been criticised very extensively for them for the whole of that time, but the point is they actually work. There's empirical evidence that they stop the boats because, of course, once they were implemented after 2001, we did have an average of 3 illegal arrivals every year under those policies. So they were clearly and unarguably a success.
But what we believe is the only way to solve this problem? Isn't there possibly another solution that might work just as well?
Well, that is a solution. Well, these are the policies that have actually done the job. I mean, there's no better guarantee of a policy outcome than one that's actually worked in the past. So we're saying if you're serious about stopping people smuggling, adopt these policies. And if you do adopt these policies, and if you have some resolve to stick to them, then people smugglers would actually know you were serious, and they wouldn't continue to see Australia as a soft touch, which is what has got us into this terrible situation in the first place.
So you're not prepared to consider anything that's in any way different from the policies that John Howard had in place?
Well, Lyndal, we know what works, and if they were serious, if the Labor Party and Julia Gillard were serious about stopping people smuggling, these are the policies they would adopt.
Scott Morrison said yesterday that the problem is not the policies, but it's the government itself. Is that an argument that the government needs to, whatever this government does, the government needs to change before anything would work?
Well, I think there's a lot of validity in that. The problem is I couldn't even tell you how many positions the Labor Party has had on this issue, and you'd need to really go back over a lot of years to find out how many times they've changed their mind. And the problem is when you adopt a new policy, people smugglers who are making millions of dollars out of this evil trade are not just going to down tools, they're going to probe for weakness, and they're going to continue to find ways that they can continue to do what they're doing because there is an enormous amount at stake.
Wouldn't they even do that under your policies, because you've argued that you should be able to turn boats around to Indonesia where it's safe to do that, but Indonesia says that it doesn't like that policy?
Well, I don't doubt that they will test our resolve, but what they will find is when they do that is that we are not for moving. The problem is when they've tested the resolve with the Labor Party is every time they have won that battle of wills, and that is why the point has been made that it is the Labor Party that is now the problem. Whilst they remain in government, they remain as a huge incentive for people smuggling, and people smugglers will not be convinced that they're serious about doing anything to actually stop them from being in charge over who's coming to Australia.
Is there a political advantage to not resolving this issue?
This is not a political point that we are making.
But your party has campaigned hard on this since 2001. Surely that's because there is, at least in some way, a political advantage to the position you hold.
Well, our position has not been, it's not politics that has led us to this position. It's because we want to see Australia, the federal government, being in charge over who comes to our country. The problem is under the policies of the Labor Party is that we actually have no border protection system left. So look, it's not politics that have brought us to this conclusion. It's a desire to see Australia again in charge over who's coming here, which I think is what the Australian people always expect of their federal government.
Do you not agree that the Immigration Department says the policies you had in place under John Howard would not work now?
No, we certainly don't agree, and if we agreed with that, we wouldn't be pursuing them.
On what basis do you not agree? Because surely the Immigration Department has some deep understanding of this issue.
On the basis of the empirical evidence about what happened when we implemented them in the past. We stopped people smuggling because we implemented a series of very controversial, tough but necessary policies, and if we were to go back to them, we absolutely believe that they will stop people smuggling again.
Scott Morrison has criticised the Malaysian people swap on the grounds that it is only 800 people, and once that cap is reached, the boats will keep coming and those asylum seekers won't go to Malaysia. But the Immigration Minister points out there's an effective cap on Nauru as well, because there's only so much capacity there, isn't he right?
Well, I think the point about the Malaysian people swap is that we're swapping 800 people for 4,000 with the Malaysians. Now, we're getting a rate of illegal arrivals of about 300 a week at the moment, so it's less than 3 weeks' work under the Labor Party to have that cap exceeded.
And how many would it take to fill up Nauru?
Well, clearly Nauru would also be part of a suite of policies that we would implement to stop people smuggling. It's not the one plank of policy that we would be implementing. We would also adopt temporary protection visas, which is vitally important because it totally undermines the people smugglers' business model, and we would turn boats back around when it's safe and appropriate to do so. So we're not advocating Nauru in isolation, we're advocating it as part of a wider suite of policies that would stop people smuggling.
Michael Keenan, thank you very much for your time.
Good to talk to you, Lyndal.